bit of a sad occasion, but certainly a celebration of life. Tanya Unkovic, of course, she's a regular contributor to the show. And last Friday, she was very open, sharing about how her mum had passed away after her health had been deteriorating for some time. That's such a difficult time for her. But she's actually said, you know what? I want to talk about this on the radio. I want to share what the grief process has been for me. Just such a generous spirit to do that in what I'm sure is a difficult time for her.
Yeah, certainly. So, it feels like over the last couple of years we've been journeying with Tanya as her mum, her mum has lived to the ripe old age of 90, but in the last couple of years has had dementia, and it's, just walking through that and her walking through that journey with her mum. She's done it with such grace, and it's been a real privilege, I guess you could say, being... I don't want to say a part of that journey, but certainly, listening to her stories and hearing about her mum and her love for her mum, and again, being able to be a part of that this week, going to the funeral was very, very special indeed.
Now, for them as a household, because her dad passed away last year, they weren't able to have a funeral for her dad. And one of the things that was said at the service during the week was this is kind of like a funeral for mum and dad, because we haven't had a chance to grieve publicly. Sharing her grief and her story, I'm looking forward to chatting with her. That's coming up very shortly. Also, we continue our Lenten devotional series and really been enjoying this. What a blessing it is to have different people from different faith perspectives sharing their view on the Easter story. So we're continuing with that. And look, important to talk about the tough stuff, important for Tanya to be able to share her own grief journey. Well, grief and tragedy is, of course, just a part of life, and if there's ways in which we should respond, healthy ways in which we should do grief. However, there's the theory, and then there's the harsh reality of when grief comes to us. Joining us on the program now is Tanya Unkovic. Tanya, kia ora. Thank you very much for joining us today.
You are welcome.
Now,
always welcome.
Grief is something which has visited you, quite a lot in the last wee while, and to be fair, you're right in the middle of it at the moment. Tell us of your circumstances, Tanya.
Yeah, sure. Well, as many of you know, my dad passed last August, and we were all a little bit surprised that Dad passed before Mum, because she's actually the one that's been so unwell and miraculously has been alive for a lot longer than we thought. And Monday, a week or two ago, I got the call and I had a feeling this would be it. And she spent 5 days in Auckland Hospital, and I was by her side as much as I could be. And we were prepared that she was going to pass, and then she passed on the Friday last week.
There is a special grace for knowing when that is going to happen, getting some warning, being able to be there, being able to have any last conversations, expressing how you feel, those sorts of things. But then that doesn't mean when it does happen that it's not still a shock, still a physical pain.
It really is. I really thought that I may not weep when Mum actually did pass, but boy, I howled. And it's possible that I was just trying to hold on until she did take her final breath, because even though she couldn't say much in those past few days, she looked at me one day and said, "Don't you cry." And so I held it together for as much as possible while she was still with us. But as we were taking care of her after she passed, there's no doubt about it. You just get hit because it's final.
Yeah. In terms of, I suppose, the process, and I mean, as you've mentioned, this is something you're not a stranger to. It's something which I suppose you don't want to get used to, but another unhealthy way of approaching it is trying to keep pressing it down, to try and avoid grief when it is a natural part of the life's process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel privileged to have had the warning 3 times with my late husband and my dad and my mum. And I feel privileged because you are able to spend that time and be present and feel the grief, say the things that you want to say, or even without words, just being there. I feel very, very fortunate, and it's a very, very different type of grief when someone is gone
Yeah.
suddenly.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel that God's had me on an apprenticeship a lot in my life and preparing me for Phil. So much happened before that, and then Dad, and then preparing me for Mum. So, I knew what was coming. It didn't make it easier, like you say, but
Yeah.
to be able to be present is such a gift.
Particularly, I suppose, during these COVID times, losing both parents during some level of restrictions, does this add to the grieving process? Does this add to the burden in some ways?
Oh, it does. It does, because we were not able to bury Dad. We were locked down on the day of his funeral. And I'm very aware that there is a little bit of parked grief there for
Yeah.
me that I felt that I held on to until Mum passed. And I speak to other people who have not been able to process their grief, who have not been able to bury their loved ones during this time. It complicates the process. You're not only you're sad, but part of you is angry as well, and you feel, why did this happen to us? So you can really get into that cycle of thinking. But if that is you, I know what I had to do was I had to fall into radical acceptance. Because without that, you could actually go a bit wild.
Yeah.
You could become so angry and feel this justified anger, but at the end of the day, it would have been me that suffered. And so, I really feel for all of us, everyone who has lost someone during this time, because it is really, really tough.
I mean, there's different stages, of course, to the grieving process, but there's also, I mean, we're all individuals. We all respond to the same situation with different emotional responses. Different members of the family will be dealing with tragedy in different ways. That can complicate family dynamics as well.
Oh, it really does. And that's where it actually pays to have someone help the family sometimes, because the family, when you're in the grief, you don't identify that the reason family member A is as angry as anything. Usually underneath all anger is sadness and grief.
Yeah.
Someone may just disappear and not come back for a couple of days because they can't handle it. Grief is like a fingerprint, they say. We all process it very differently, and sometimes we just need to go, what is, and hold each other and expect that someone may go a bit AWOL, but just really, this is the time as a family, as a community even, to come together to hold each other during a time of grief.
We all perhaps emotionally fragile, but this is a time for extra grace, for extra understanding, for more patience than you would normally have, I suppose.
Look, hearing you say that, it's not only for someone who's just lost a loved one, it's for all of us. Everyone in some way is grieving because life's been different, hasn't it, for the last 2 years? And we're all grieving life as it was, or grieving something, and family dynamics have changed. But more than ever, we need to now unite. We need to forgive, we need to come together, we need to put everything aside and hold each other up, because at the end of the day, that's how we're going to get through this, whatever this is,
Very much so. And in amongst that, of course, important not just to say, hey, yes, I've got all this grace and this understanding, this empathy for everybody else, but got to save a big bucket of that just for us. It's particularly, I know in this type of situation, a lot of pressure on you, and there's different things that need to be organised and decisions need to be made. But giving some grace and some space for yourself during this time, very important. You don't need to be the one that's pretending to keep it all together so that everyone else can grieve, right?
Look, I'm very open with my grief. I'm very open because I know that helps others on their journey. Yes, there is a strong exterior, but I really feel, and I think it's very important to let other people know that there is that as well in me, because that gives others permission to fall apart.
Yeah.
I know that at the moment I've got to be like a bit of a machine to get things, done logistically and that. But I am going to allow myself to have that time of grace afterwards and really recover, because you do run on adrenaline, and you're busy, and when you're on that high, you come down. Even though it's a painful high, you do come down. So to be prepared for that.
Tanya, thank you so much for the generosity of your spirit to allow us into what is a sensitive space for you and your family right now. I know that there are a lot of people, a lot of regular Rima listeners who are praying for you and what you're facing at the moment. But because of the pain that you carry, I know that you're also supporting and encouraging so many other people who are perhaps either going through that now or still have some unresolved issues from perhaps a grieving process in the past. Thank you so much again, Tanya. Our hearts are with you. Thank you for being on the program today.
It is my pleasure. Thank you.